Right, Manchester United finally have a full agreement with Paris Saint-Germain to sign the midfielder Manuel Ugarte for a fee of over £50 million. Ugarte has been United's primary midfield target throughout the window. The fee is broken down into £42.2 million initially, and then add-ons of up to £8.5 million. Meanwhile, Scott McTominay is close to finalising exit terms with United out of his £25.4 million move to Napoli. Once exit terms are agreed, he is expected to fly to Italy for a medical. Okay, Sam, you're back, so I'm going to pose you a question. Why do United want Ugarte? Well, Ugarte is a defence midfielder and it's a position that Manchester United really need. Only Sheffield United exceeded more shots in the Premier League last season than Erik ten Hag's side. If we see from the stats that Ugarte will provide protection to the Manchester United back four because he breaks up the play. So these are the stats compared to all the midfielders in Europe's top 5 leagues last season. These are the stats per 90, ranked second for tackles. These are the number of tackles he's involved in, so he does like a tackle. And then these are the tackles that he wins. He presses as well. That's another key theme of Erik ten Hag's signings. We have a lot of people who push high up the pitch, but then we're back to sort of the breaking up of the play, the ball recoveries, the tackles and interceptions. So yeah, Manchester United's back four, it chops and changes so much, doesn't it? But maybe Ugarte could provide that stability in that defensive midfield position. So his stats look impressive, but where will he fit in? Will he go straight into the team? Well, of course, Casemiro currently has that defensive midfield position. As you can see, compared to Ugarte's stats last season, Casemiro is inferior. Ugarte is superior in terms of tackles and interceptions, in ball recoveries and grounds rules. But this is the one that stood out for me. Losses of possession. He gives the ball away a lot less than Casemiro did last season. Of course, Casemiro had a really poor season for Manchester United at Old Trafford. But what's interesting about Ugarte is that he plays for PSG. They have a lot of the ball, they have a lot of possession, but he statistically ranks really high in terms of European midfielders for tackles and interceptions. So it's a really good sort of pressing, counter-pressing signing as well. So I think this is a good buy. Yeah, but I'm scratching my head because this is PSG, so if his stats, which look impressive, are so good, then why are they letting him go? Well, if you remember last summer, Chelsea bid for Manuel Ugarte, and then PSG just snuck in at the last minute to take it away from another Todd Boehly signing. PSG, it sort of worked out for him a little bit last season. He started a lot of games in Ligue 1, but he wasn't really trusting the Champions League, which, as we know, is the jewel in PSG's crown, really. He didn't start any of their knockout matches in the Champions League. And of course, PSG have signed Joao Neves from Benfica. He's a defense midfielder. He plays in that position. So they're probably thinking it's the right time to let Manuel Ugarte go. Welcome to 1 Hour Sports and thanks for tuning in to listen to today's program. We are taking Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville's thoughts ahead of the big game on Sunday. Manchester United will welcome Liverpool to Old Trafford for late kickoff. Jamie, I'll start with you. Yeah, listen, it's a huge game. It's one of the biggest that we cover on Sky. We always cover this one. And it means we've made games of life that nobody got in Liverpool's favour, some big scores. But I think Old Trafford, even for Jurgen Klopp, I think Jurgen Klopp had in 10 or 11 games. Only won it twice, and they were eye-catching games in terms of the score. I think one was 5-0, one was 6-2. But in the main, Liverpool found it difficult at Old Trafford. And if you go back to last season, it was probably where the wheels fell off in terms of Liverpool going for the title. So it'll be a tough game, but the fact that Liverpool have already picked 6 points up. I don't think a draw is the end of the world. I mean, going to the international break, but as I said, I think for any Liverpool team going back 30, 40 years, which is some of the best Liverpool teams we've seen, Old Trafford is always going to be the place to go. Take a draw? I wouldn't take a draw, no, I wouldn't take it. I think Liverpool are the best team in the United States. They should be going, they're looking to win. Would you take a draw? No, I wouldn't take a draw. Obviously last season their FA Cup game was unbelievable. I think Erik ten Hag has a knack of just finding the right result at the right time. I worry about him a little bit on Sunday if we were to lose badly. Obviously James mentioned a couple of those bad defeats that we've had against Jurgen Klopp, but I don't see that on Sunday. I don't think it will be a big defeat. I don't see him with any stretched imagination. Obviously, I'm confident. But they have a habit of turning up in the right moments when they're at Erik ten Hag and getting results, so I do think he needs one. I think that Brighton result last weekend, it's not putting big pressure on, but he is under an element of pressure after what happened last season. And the league can't go as badly this season. They can't be in the same position 2 or 3 months in, end of October, early November, so I think it is an important game. It's very early in the season. I'd say it's difficult to say it's more important for United than Liverpool. But I think it's more important for Erik ten Hag in terms of just getting the season going a little bit and getting some performance levels up. They just signed in the first 2 weeks against Wolves and Brighton. The performance levels are still at a level that are not quite good enough. And that's an imbalance in the team caused by maybe a set-apart team selection. Joshua Zirkzee not playing in the first half or first hour of games. I think that will change on Sunday, but we'll see what happens. I think he's a little bit more worried than he's letting on about the game. It's the last 25 minutes having been with him. I think I'm a bit of a wimp. I don't think it's the end of the world. I think well, that's that. Brilliant. Guys, listen, we really appreciate. I'm sure that debate will carry on when we leave you, but we really appreciate your time today. It's only going to get on in the summer. Enjoy it, enjoy it. We'll see you soon, guys. Thanks so much for joining us on Deadline Day. You talked, Micah, about the comparison between Messi and Ronaldo, and that's the sort of same breath that we're talking about Erling Haaland in. As you said, he's a number 9, he's an out-and-out number 9, and so you would expect his goal-scoring figures to stand up to them. But they don't just stand up to Messi and Ronaldo, he's surpassing them. And if he carries on like this, he would reach, after the same number of games as Messi and Ronaldo have played, the same number as Ronaldo has played, on 1,015 career goals for Erling Haaland. That's the projection if he carries on scoring at this rate. But if you look, Messi and Ronaldo both picked up at around about this stage, so that's possible as well. And they're pretty well regarded. The only thing I will say, because I know a lot of people looking at how can you compare Haaland to Messi and Ronaldo, we're talking about purely goals. This is just numbers. Purely numbers and goals. And this is club and country. And the other thing we should say as well is that Norway haven't qualified for a couple of tournaments as well, whereas Argentina, Portugal, they're sort of not quite ever present, but they're usually there. Yeah, I think in terms of Messi, we know what he can do in terms of goals and assists, and at times he'd play up front on the right number 10 in them positions. We're familiar with his work. Yes, Ronaldo as well. Don't forget, he started off as a winger and then he matured into sort of goal scorer, number 9 movement in the box. But in terms of numbers, especially in the Premier League as well, what Haaland is producing now at his age is just staggering. Absolutely unbelievable. In there, he's so sharp. And in terms of the numbers, what you've shown, there's no reason he can't surpass that because of, as long as he stays injury-free, you've always got to talk about injuries. Because if he plays in a team like Man City, constantly creating chances for him, he's going to get the opportunity to score them. 263 goals in 317 games. If you just think about that for a second, how difficult that is to do. Of course, he's playing in a great side that create lots of chances for him, but it is staggering. It's staggering. And it looks like you figure things out as you get older as well, looking after yourself, making sure you eat correctly and you'll prepare yourself, ice baths and all these things that he speaks about regularly doing to just give himself that little bit of an edge. He's a phenomenon, the guy. He's an amazing player to watch and he's so different to the other two that you've mentioned. And I don't think for 1 second we're going to compare their styles or anything like that, but an out-and-out goal scorer. It's very hard to think of anyone that's as clinical and has every single goal in the bag. Hang on to your seats here. It inevitably involves Chelsea. Here we go, edging closer to an agreement with Manchester United. We're hearing over the signing of Jadon Sancho. There has been further talks, permanent and loan options still on the table. Ideally, what we understand is Chelsea need to offload players. Raheem Sterling, as we mentioned a little while ago, one of a number of players being offered to clubs, while United remain open to the idea of Sterling joining. They're not actively pursuing it. Their focus is on Sancho. They don't need to replace him, we understand, if he was to leave. Chelsea is still with us, and we were just very briefly running through the options of players that Chelsea have who could play in the same position as Jadon Sancho. It is frightening. If you start with Neto, go to Nkunku, Palmer can play out in those wide positions that Jadon Sancho would like to. Madueke, you put João Felix in there, Mudryk in there as well. So, why on earth? The talent Jadon Sancho has got is not in doubt, but why on earth would you want to add Sancho to an already clustered squad in those positions? I heard Enzo Maresca say the other day that he really wasn't happy with Mudryk's performance. And I look at what Sancho is very technical, can come inside, can play on either wing, like you said. He had a fantastic year at Dortmund and ultimately just fell out with the manager, Ten Hag, at Man United. I think he was probably hoping that Ten Hag got the sack. It wasn't to be. And now I think he's moving on, back to London. I feel like with Enzo Maresca, he's going to be playing in a system, a team where they have a philosophy. And I think he'll thrive there. I think it's a great move for him, his family, and obviously Man United that they want to get rid of him anyway. Do you think that means, from what you're saying there, that we could see outgoings for the likes of Mudryk that we might not be expecting? Yeah, I think, like we've said, it's all going to be around Chelsea today. There'll be ins, there'll be outs. Like you said, there's a lot of players there that can play in those positions. Do you really want those players, all them options? Because if you've got the likes of Palmer's playing all the time, guaranteed, whether it be on the right, is he better in the 10? I like him in the 10 because I think he knits everything together with Magic out there, with the strike, with Jackson. He can play through balls. Obviously, he scores himself. He's got real intelligence way ahead of his years. So I'd like to see him in that number 10 position, but he can play anywhere. Players of that quality can play anywhere. But he's definitely starting. We all know that. And then Maduek, he started playing really well now, direct. Can come inside, can go outside. He's doing really well. Mudryk hasn't done well since he's gone there. You've seen a few flashes in the pan, but nothing much what you would expect of him when he came with that huge price tag. And when you see the highlights of what he was doing at Shakhtar, it was unbelievable, and it hasn't happened for Chelsea. So bringing someone like Jadon Sancho in, he gives you versatility on either wing. He's got intelligence, you've got Neto that you've just paid a lot of money for. I love Neto, and then Nkunku. Again, Nkunku hasn't really. Obviously he was injured, so you give him the benefit of doubt. When you're out for so long, it takes a long time to get back into the rhythm of things. So I'm not ready to make an assumption on if he's a good signing or not, but Neto, he always causes problems. You know, he'd done it in the Euros. He was coming off the bench and he was creating goals. At Wolves, he was fantastic. Very direct, can score goals. I look at Sancho though, and I think it's a little bit different. I think he can play on either wing, and that will give him the versatility to put Cole Palmer in the 10 position. If Majuriki's not playing, then Sancho can go on the right side, the left side as well. I like it. I think it's great for Sancho. I think it's great for Man United. And I think it's a really good signing for Chelsea. Breathe, Manchester United fans, because there was this huge delay, what felt like a huge delay. When is the signing of Manuel Ugarte going to be announced? It's announced. Manuel Ugarte is a Manchester United player. He's joined from PSG. A reminder of the deal, it's a €50 million initial fee, plus €10 million in performance-related add-ons. He's a player we've been talking about throughout the whole of this summer transfer window. He was Manchester United's primary target. They couldn't agree a fee with PSG right at the start of the window. That's because PSG wanted around €60 million fixed fee for Manuel Ugarte. Manchester United wanted to negotiate. They were looking at other players as well, even Sofiane Amrabat, who was on loan with them last season. Youssef Fofana was a man that was mentioned. Sander Berge, who ended up going to Putnam, but he was the constant. Manuel Ugarte was the one that they wanted. And finally, the Uruguayan international has joined Manchester United. He hasn't joined in time, unfortunately, to play against Liverpool because he needed to be registered by midday today. That didn't happen. But following the international break, Manuel Ugarte will be in that red shirt for Manchester United. Manuel Ugarte, a Manchester United player. And you have to say damns that Manchester United have had a brilliant window because you look at what they've already got on the books. That's another one in through the books. I think they went into the transfer window with priority positions. They thought the fullback area needed strengthening. Noussair Mazraoui came in. He can play on both sides in the right back area and the left back area. They knew that Raphael Varane was leaving, so they brought in Lenny Yoro, a young up-and-coming centre back. Real Madrid was strongly linked with trying to sign him, and United beat Real Madrid to his signing. And there was always talk about whether they were going to sign another central defender. And in the end, they did. They went into Bayern Munich and signed Matthijs de Ligt. They wanted to bring in a forward as well. Joshua Zirkzee has come in and he started off so well for United. And now the midfielder who they've been chasing the entire transfer window in Manuel Ugarte from PSG has finally arrived at Old Trafford. A lot of competition at Chelsea. John, let's come to your piece in the back page of the Mirror. Sterling is stuck. Raheem sweating on exit or a season on sidelines at Chelsea. That's a pretty bleak prospect. How likely for Raheem Sterling is that, John? Yeah, look, I do think it's really in the balance now. I think it's a big 48 hours ahead for Chelsea. There's no doubt about it. They've got a hell of a lot of players to move within that period of time. Yes, they'd like to bring in more players. Jadon Sancho, of course, potentially a striker yet. Maybe even sort of a late sort of move for Tony. But to do that, to facilitate that, they've got to move Sterling on and basically, players like that. And I'm not completely sort of comfortable, I must say. I don't think Sterling's been treated incredibly, potentially particularly well. I mean, he spent all sort of kind of season thinking he was going to be a big player for Maresca this season, was sort of kind of front and center of a new sort of kind of ad campaign going into the season. And the first kind of hint that he wouldn't be part of it was on the Friday when he had a sort of chat with Maresca ahead of the first game of the season. Since then, he's been ostracized. Look, he's on a big contract. You can't hide from that £325,000 a week. He's not the one that's been agitating to move. So he's made absolutely clear that he's committed to Chelsea and wanted to ideally to stay. So they've kind of got to find a solution here. And there's not many other teams in the Premier League, who really have kind of got that money to match. I think his preference, is to stay in English football, because he's very proud to play for England in the past and I think wants to regain that place. I don't think therefore he'd be particularly keen on Saudi at all. So there's a lot of work to be done. And I do think that Chelsea are causing problems for themselves here. If they end up with 2 or 3, still Ben Chilwell, of course, sort of other players, if there's a heavy dressing room with big players, big names, who as well as they might be behaving, and I've no reason to doubt that. I still think, you're causing yourself problems if you've stored up players who are not going to play. That's not a recipe for a happy and sort of harmonious squad at all. Indeed, we wish Raheem Sterling all the best, and indeed Ben Chilwell and other players affected Chelsea in the next couple of days, all the transfer lines as they come. Another player who's had a troubled time, back page of the Sun, I think we saw it flash up there, Sancho scrap. Juventus in talks to secure Jadon on loan, but Maresca hints at a late Chelsea move. Mark, of course, it's your patch Manchester United. What's happening with Sancho? We thought he'd patched all things up with Erik ten Hag. Well, it's an uneasy truce with Erik ten Hag, and I think both sides did it from a pragmatic point of view that, Sancho wasn't going to get his move to Dortmund, back to Dortmund. Ten Hag didn't really want this to continue for another season. I think the owners made it clear to both that it's in your best interest to bury the hatchet and let's see where it takes us. But I think there was always a possibility that Sancho moved on. I think United's preference would be to do a deal with Juventus because that would enable them to get him off the wage bill, whether it's by loan or by sale. I think the proposal of a Raheem Sterling swap deal with Chelsea doesn't really stack up for United, but it's one that they would consider if on Friday evening that Sancho's still there and they haven't got him out of the club. But the ideal scenario for United is to, at some point, get some money back because they've spent a lot of money on the fee, a lot of money on the wages, and he's clearly got no future in the plans of Erik ten Hag. So, they need to get him out of the club. He's got 2 years left on his contract. It's a big contract. So I think Juventus are the favourites, but United aren't going to get what they want for him. But equally, they'll probably get more from Juventus than they would do with Chelsea because if they swap him for Raheem Sterling, they're not cutting costs because they're going to have to take on Raheem Sterling's contract, which is longer than Jadon Sancho. So that one for me doesn't really stack up unless both clubs are desperate on Friday night. So Juventus, good option for Sancho, good option for United. Juventus need a forward now because Cheese is going to Liverpool. So it does make a lot of sense, that one. Okay, before we go to the break, I'll come to John in a second. But Mark, what's your sense of the next couple of days as far as the transfer window goes? Do you expect it to be busy for Manchester United and across the board? I think it'd be one of the more interesting windows. I mean, the last few transfer windows have been a bit of a damp squib, haven't they? But I think with Sterling's future uncertain, with Sancho's future, Ben Chilwell, like John said, I think there are some big names that need a move. One caveat is that the Saudi window doesn't close until October. So a lot of clubs can still find, a way to get them at the club to Saudi, and even the Turkish window opens to mid-September. So there are options, but I think Friday there'll be a lot of business. I think there's a lot of clubs that need to do some business.
So yeah, I think Friday is going to be quite exciting. John, what are you expecting to be busy? Loans. Yeah, loans, Teddy. I really feel that, the last couple of days will be defined by a few clubs having to offload players. And suddenly you'll see decent names, decent opportunities pop up. And I do think, even clubs that sort of almost hinting that they're done might just find a little bit more, to find a creative loan and sort of kind of try and press ahead with that. Yeah, I think that Tony Sterling wants to watch Sancho, of course, but I think there might be some creative loans. And I think that might be, a sort of kind of, it's been quite a fashion, this market in this window. And I think that will continue into the final couple of days.
There could still be other incomings at Chelsea as well in the next couple of days. Chelsea have made a move to sign Ivan Toney from Brentford. Chelsea are after a proven goal scorer to be their new number 9 and have been also linked with a move for the Napoli striker Victor Osimhen. And now Gianluca Di Marzio at Sky Italy said last night that Chelsea are willing to send their first offer to Napoli in the upcoming hours for Osimhen. Chelsea, it seems, pushing hard for a number 9 in the next couple of days. If it was a straight shootout between Ivan Toney and Victor Osimhen, who would you prefer to have? I think from Chelsea's perspective, what they need from a number 9 is someone that's no one guarantees goals because moves can go in different ways. But I feel like Toney is more of a sure thing for Chelsea than Osimhen at the moment. I think Osimhen's had a difficult 12 months. I think his stock has fallen. I think there's more question marks over Osimhen than there would have been 12 months ago. I think with Ivan Toney, he's probably not a pure goal scorer like Osimhen, but what I think he does do, I think he's a very, very good facilitator. If you look at what Chelsea are building in the front positions in terms of the players that play wide and the players that play number 10, I think there's potentially a lot of goal and assist output from the players that play in those positions. And what I think Toney does as a number 9, I think that would be more beneficial to the players that Chelsea have in the building already than what I think of Osimhen. Also, I think Jackson, you don't want to stunt his development. I think there's a good striker there in Jackson. I probably didn't think that when he first joined, but at the second half of last season, I started to watch more of him and think, yeah, there's something to work with here. I think if Osimhen comes in, I think they've got too many similar traits, and I think that would harm Jackson. I think with Toney, they're completely different strikers. So, although Jackson probably wouldn't play every game, I think he's more likely to get football with Toney there because they're different types of players. So for me, if it was me in charge of Chelsea, I'd want Toney. And I'm split because I think although there is the argument that Ivan Toney is potentially a sure thing, he does score a lot of penalties. And I don't think Cole Palmer is going to give up pens anytime soon. And Osimhen, as I was told by one of my friends, is almost allergic to taking pens, so they won't have that debate. But I do see the argument of bringing other players into the game. But then I also think Chelsea are going to have so many creative players that actually just having a man who's in the box and wants to score goals and Osimhen might also work. In reality, it's a phenomenal problem to have. You've got Ivan Toney, who's a Premier League proven player, and Victor Osimhen, who I feel like probably with all the noise going on at Napoli, he's kind of going like my time here is done. I've won the Scudetto for them. He's a hero over there. Now, can I go and do this elsewhere? And I think Chelsea feels like a really good place for that to happen. Because although obviously Nicholas Jackson is there, you'd imagine he'd come in and be the number 1 straight away. Yeah, Napoli tend to be fairly difficult to do transfer deals with. They're always tough negotiators. 2 days to go then. What's the feeling? Do you think that Chelsea will get a striker over the line before the deadline? I mean, you said it there, Dave, when we were talking about Ivan Toney initially, that Chelsea want a proven number 9 goal scorer before the deadline. So it sounds like they definitely want one. But having watched them against Wolves, yes, Wolves defensively were a bit shaky in the second half. But you look at kind of all the creativity, Dan, you mentioned all the talent they have already in-house. I think we have to also strip it back to what are the expectations for Chelsea this season. It'll be a Champions League spot, I think, would be successful for them. You look at the squad they have, you would think that the talent in that squad can definitely do that. I look at the 4 that ended that game, Joao Felix, Pedro Neto, Cole Palmer, and Noni Madueke. I mean, that front 4 is going to trouble quite a lot of defenses this season. Now, whether Nicholas Jackson and Felix score the goals themselves, we'll see. But there's definitely enough goals, I think, in that team to challenge for top 4 and to play some really interesting football. And I agree with you, Dan, in terms of I don't want to see Nicholas Jackson's development stunned because I think there's definitely a player there. He's only 23 years old, and I think between him and Felix playing perhaps a false 9, they definitely have enough options there. I'd say the only slight problem that Chelsea might have is when else are you going to have a number 9 like Osimhen or Ivan Toney actually available to buy when there's not that much competition. I think the temptation is probably where Chelsea are going. We could get Osimhen in through the door and no one's going after him. So I'd be tempted, and obviously it's a transfer show, so I just want more transfers.